So, if like me you've dipped your toes into some heavy attack goodness over the years, you may have noticed that some heavy attacks are better than others. I'm of course talking about heavy attacks that proc slash, because not only are you getting the juicy damage of the heavy attack, you are also getting a very powerful slash proc as a follow-up. We like that, that's good. It can, however, be a little bit laborious to figure out which weapons are worth building towards a slash-based heavy attack and which aren't. Especially since I couldn't, for the life of me, find a comprehensive list anywhere on the internet. So I decided to do some research. So, we currently have 26 different melee weapon types in the game, and exactly half of them, so 13, have a forced slash proc on their heavy attack, because this is based on the weapon type, not the weapon itself or the stance. The heavy attack is always the same. Though it's technically 13 plus 1 because each glaive has a specific proc that it will force on a heavy attack detonation, and for the glyph prime that just so happens to be slash, which is why the glyph prime is so strong. But I digress. The weapon types that have a forced slash proc on their heavy attacks are sights, two-handed nikanas, regular nikanas, claws, warfans, whips, rapiers, dual daggers, regular daggers, machetes, tonfas, and the ghoul soul. Not all of these are the same though, and this is where it gets a little bit complicated, because not every weapon type has the same damage multiplier on its heavy attack. Especially if that multiplier is split into multiple hits, which might not seem like it would make that big of a difference because we're talking about slash procs here, which do true damage, and they don't have a cap, so it doesn't really matter if you proc one big one or two smaller ones, but multiple hits do give you a higher chance of proccing viral off the weapon, which is really beneficial if you don't have an outside source of viral. So as far as the heavy attack multipliers go, the best ones are on sights and two-handed nikanas because they have a 600% multiplier. Slightly below that we have claws, nikanas, warfans, and the glyph prime with a 500% multiplier. Then we have the whips and rapiers with a 450% multiplier, followed by regular daggers which have a 250% multiplier, as well as dual daggers and tonfas, both of which having 250% multiplier, but they also both hit twice. Then we have heavy sights with a 200% multiplier, followed by machetes at 150, and finally we have the ghoul soul, which does hit twice but doesn't have a multiplier at all, it just does base damage. So all in all, the weapons that will give you the biggest multiplier on your heavy attack slash procs would be sights and two-handed nikanas. This doesn't mean that all sights and two-handed nikanas will be better at this than any other weapon, because it also depends on the stats of the weapon. This just means that their stances give them the biggest multiplier. So a shitty scythe, which has a 600% multiplier, will be beaten by a really good rapier, which only has a 450% multiplier. And I don't even want to talk about some of the extra effects you can get on heavy attacks on some weapons, because that would make this even more complicated, and we really don't need to do that right now. Now let's talk a little bit about the actual build. So how do you want to build a weapon for slash-based heavy attacks? Well, the general idea is to squeeze in as much damage, crit, combo, and viral as possible, unless you're providing viral from another source, whether it be a priming weapon or a companion or even your teammates. Having viral is really important though, because these are very juicy slash procs we're talking about, so every viral proc is gonna add a ton of damage. So you definitely want to squeeze it into the setup in some way, shape, or form. Sacrificial mods are also really good, specifically Sacrificial Steel, because it provides far more crit chance than anything else. I also think it's worth running Amalgam Organ Chatter over the regular one, even though it provides a less crit damage because of the heavy attack wind-up speed. You don't want your heavy attacks to be slow, especially if you're not running Killing Blow. Also, Red Archon charts, especially Tau Forged ones, with crit damage, oof. Big. Now, some people like to run Condition Overload instead of Sacrificial Pressure. This is only worth it if you can reliably proc 3 or 4 status effects on the enemy. But most heavy attack builds won't actually do that on their own, as most enemies will die from a single hit. They only start surviving these massive slash procs once you get above level, I don't know, 200-300. So if you're gonna do that, make sure you're playing in a party so other people can proc status effects on your enemies, you have a companion that can spread around status effects, or you're using a priming weapon. Otherwise, you're not just not taking full advantage of Condition Overload, but you're also actively losing crit chance from Sacrificial Steel, since it's no longer paired with Sacrificial Pressure. And finally, if you want to be really fancy, we need to talk about Smite mods, because Smite mods are really good, especially if you have the Prime variants. They do require some faffing around, because, well, every time you go into a mission, you need to make sure that you're matching the right Smite mod to the faction you're going to be fighting, but they are by far one of the biggest multipliers for slash procs. Simply because they're just a different multiplier, right? We already have a bunch of damage, bunch of crit, all of that, so increasing it further doesn't give us that big of a boost. But if we add a smite mod, it takes all the damage we are already doing and adds an additional 30 or 55% if you have a primed version on top of that. I personally don't use them because for the content that I'm doing, right, I don't go above the difficulty of Archon Hunts. They are a massive overkill, you really don't need them. But if you're doing something very, very high level, you should definitely use smite mods. Just make sure you have the right one before going into a mission. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say, so I thank you very much for watching. As always guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video and found it helpful. If you have any other tips for doing heavy attack builds with Slash, please leave them in the comment section down below for other people, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.